They say money changes people. I disagree. Money doesn't change you. It exposes you. It peels away the mask and shows what's been hiding underneath all along. I learned that truth the moment I held a flimsy piece of paper worth $42 million. And in that moment, staring at those winning numbers, I realized something worse than poverty. My own family was about to destroy itself. It was a Wednesday evening, humid as hell, the kind of Florida night where the air feels thick enough to chew. I sat at the old oak table in my kitchen, ceiling fan clicking in its lazy circle above me. The lottery ticket lay flat in front of me, the ink still smudged from where the cashier had handed it over earlier that week. I'd bought one every Wednesday for 37 years, always from the same gas station down on Pine Grove Road. A ritual, nothing more. Something to break the monotony of lonely nights after Mary passed. But that night, the TV anchor's voice rattled through my dusty living room. And the winning Powerball numbers are... I almost didn't bother looking up. After all, what were the odds? I'd spent decades tossing losing slips into the trash. But the numbers kept rolling across the screen, and each one lit up like a fire in my chest. 14, 27, 33, 41. 52, Powerball 9. My ticket. Every damn one. I just sat there for a long time, staring. The kitchen clock ticked like a hammer in my skull. $42 million. Enough to buy 3 of these towns and still have money left to burn. Enough to erase every bill, every worry, every sleepless night. Enough to finally feel like all those years of sweat and calloused hands had meant something. And yet, instead of joy, all I felt was dread, because I knew exactly how my children would react. I could already picture my son Matthew's greedy smirk. He'd been circling my modest house like a vulture for years, always hinting about how a larger place would be better for me, when what he really wanted was to sell the land and pocket the cash. And my daughter Rebecca, with her perfect manicured nails and her husband's debts stacked to the ceiling, she'd smile sweetly, call me daddy, and then drain me dry. I folded the ticket carefully, slid it inside the back cover of Mary's old Bible, and shut it like I was closing a coffin. If I kept quiet, nobody would know. The paper said a winning ticket had been sold somewhere in our county, but the winner hadn't come forward yet. That gave me time. 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. Rebecca called me on a Friday morning, her voice dripping with that fake sugar I'd learned to hate. Dad, have you seen the news? Someone around here hit the jackpot. Can you imagine? 42 million. Gosh, if only it were you. You deserve it more than anyone. I said nothing, just grunted, sipping my black coffee. She kept fishing. I mean, you still play sometimes, don't you? You always used to, when Mom was alive. Sometimes, I muttered, don't amount to much. I could hear the frustration in her pause. She wanted me to blurt it out, to hand her the golden ticket over the phone. Instead, I let silence stretch until she finally excused herself, saying she had errands to run. By Saturday, Matthew showed up unannounced, his shiny new pickup truck parked crooked in my driveway. He didn't even knock, just barged in with that phony laugh of his. Hey Dad, thought I'd check on you. Been reading the papers? Jackpot hit right here in Franklin County. Crazy, huh? He scanned the kitchen, his eyes moving like a thief casing a store. I kept my face blank, even when he asked if I'd bought a ticket. Nah, I lied easily. Haven't played in a while. But I saw it in his eyes, the doubt. He didn't believe me. That night, lying in bed, the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the room, I realized I couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. The ticket was burning a hole in my conscience, but revealing it would be worse. I imagined Matthew fighting Rebecca, lawsuits, demands, maybe even worse. They'd tear each other apart before I ever saw a dime. So I made a choice. If my children wanted to show me their true faces, I'd let them. Quietly, patiently. I'd watch as greed turned them against each other. And when the time was right, I'd remind them whose blood ran in their veins, and whose hands still held the real fortune. The next morning, Rebecca showed up at my door, her husband trailing behind like a bad shadow. She brought a pie. of all things, smiling wide. But her eyes weren't on me. They were darting around the living room, searching. She asked about my week, about the weather, about whether I'd heard the news. Then, as she set the pie on the counter, she dropped her voice low. Dad, if it was you, you'd tell me, right? I mean, family first. I didn't answer. Just cut a slice of pie, chewed slowly, and let the silence gnaw at her. What she didn't know was that I'd already taken the first step. I'd driven into the city that morning and spoken with a lawyer about setting up a trust. An anonymous one. If the world was going to find out about my millions, it wouldn't be through my children. Because money doesn't change people. It unmasks them. And soon, Matthew and Rebecca would learn exactly what that meant. And what came next would leave scars neither of them would ever forget. Sunday morning came with the sound of gulls screeching over the bay and the smell of salt drifting through my cracked window. Small-town Florida doesn't hide much. People know who buys lottery tickets, who skips church, who's 2 months late on mortgage payments. And yet, somehow, the papers kept repeating, winter hasn't come forward. That silence was my shield, and I planned to sharpen it into a weapon. I brewed coffee slow, the way Mary used to like it, and laid out the newspaper on the kitchen table. Bold black headline, $42 million still unclaimed. I traced the words with my thumb, thinking about how quickly news like this turns neighbors into predators. If Matthew or Rebecca were suspicious already, the rest of Franklin County wouldn't be far behind. By mid-morning, the phone rang. I didn't even need to check the caller ID. Dad. Matthew's voice boomed, too cheerful. Big game on today. Thought we could watch it together. He hadn't cared about watching football with me in 20 years. Game, huh? Sure. Bring your own beer, I said flatly. He arrived with a case of imported lager and a grin wide enough to hide the truth. For the first half hour, he forced conversation about neighbors, the truck dealership, how expensive everything's gotten lately. But I saw him watching me during commercial breaks, saw his eyes shift toward the hallway like he was trying to x-ray through walls. Finally, he cracked. So, you hear about the lottery? Crazy, right? Some old-timer in town could be sitting on a fortune and not even know it. I let the silence hang, then sipped my coffee. Wouldn't that be something? He laughed, but it was hollow. His knee bounced, his fingers drummed. Then, without asking, he stood. Bathrooms down the hall, right? He knew damn well where the bathroom was. He'd grown up in this house. I stayed put, eyes fixed on the TV, but my ears followed every creak of the floorboards. He wasn't in the bathroom more than 15 seconds. Too quick. A drawer opened. Then another. When he came back, he plastered on his smile. You know, Dad, if you ever needed help with finances, I could handle it for you. Lot of scams out there targeting older folks. Older folks. I forced a chuckle, masking the bile rising in my throat. Appreciate it, son. But I've been handling my money just fine. When he left an hour later, I went straight to my bedroom. Sure enough, the bottom drawer was slightly off. The Bible was untouched, because I'd already moved it that morning. Instead of the ticket, I'd left a single folded grocery receipt inside, just to see if anyone had been snooping. And they had. Rebecca didn't wait long to make her move. By Tuesday, she arrived with her husband James, carrying takeout Chinese and big smiles. They never brought me dinner. James talked too much, filling the kitchen with stories about his latest business deals. I listened, nodded, ate my sesame chicken, but I kept one ear on Rebecca. She excused herself halfway through the meal. Just going to freshen up, Dad. 10 minutes later she reappeared, cheeks flushed, eyes darting. I knew exactly where she'd gone. The safe in my closet. Funny thing was, I'd already emptied it 2 days ago. Left it clean except for one manila folder labeled Deed Transfer. Inside wasn't a deed at all, just blank sheets of paper clipped together. Bait. The very next morning, I got a text from Rebecca. Dad, we should talk about the house. You've been living alone too long. Maybe time to think about your future. There it was, subtle as a knife to the ribs. I leaned back in my recliner, phone in hand, and let a smile creep across my face. They were biting the hook, each in their own way. But the real test was still to come. That afternoon, I drove downtown to a law office I hadn't visited in years. My old friend and attorney, Martin Pierce, still worked there, though his hair had turned white. He looked up from his desk, surprised, when I walked in. "John, it's been ages. What brings you here?" I closed the door behind me. "I've got a ticket worth $42 million, Martin. And I don't trust my own kids as far as I can throw them." He blinked once, leaned back slowly, then let out a low whistle. "Well, that explains the headlines." I told him everything. About Matthew snooping, Rebecca's little stunt with the safe, the way both of them circled me like vultures. Martin didn't interrupt, just scribbled notes and nodded occasionally. Finally, he said, "We can establish an anonymous trust. Keep the funds invisible. And if you're aiming to test them, we can craft some strategic decoys." Strategic decoys, I repeated, liking the taste of it. By the time I left his office, we had a plan. The Lottery Commission would process my claim quietly, without public announcement. The money would funnel into a trust under a neutral name. Meanwhile, I'd dangle bait, subtle hints, misleading paperwork, maybe even stage conversations, to see just how far my kids would go. That night, I sat on my porch with a cigar I'd been saving since Mary's funeral. The humid air clung to my skin, cicadas buzzing in the trees. I puffed once, exhaled slow, and watched the smoke curl into the dark. They thought they were circling me. What they didn't know was that the hunt had already turned. And soon, they discovered just how dangerous an old man with nothing left to lose, and everything to prove, could be. The first real crack came on a Thursday evening. I was sitting in my recliner, the same one Mary used to complain was too ugly for the living room, when I heard raised voices outside my house. At first, I thought it was neighbors. But when I pulled the curtain aside, I saw them, Matthew and Rebecca, standing in my driveway, arguing like teenagers fighting over the last slice of pie. I didn't step outside, just listened through the cracked window, the sticky Florida night carrying every word. "You went snooping, didn't you?" Rebecca's voice cut sharp as broken glass. "I don't know what you're talking about," Matthew growled. "Don't play dumb. Dad told me he hasn't used the safe in months. So why did he find it left wide open?" Matthew scoffed, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. "Maybe you left it open when you went creeping around." Her laugh was bitter. "I don't need to creep. He tells me things. You're just too stupid to notice." That was my cue. I pushed the curtain open a little wider, let the porch light spill across the yard. They both shut up instantly, plastering fake smiles on their faces as if I couldn't see the storm brewing beneath. "Evening, kids," I called out, voice steady. "Everything all right out there?" "Of course, Dad," Rebecca sang, sweet as poisoned honey. "Just talking about dinner plans." Matthew nodded stiffly. "Yeah, we were thinking maybe we should all eat together this weekend." I let the silence hang, then gave a slow nod. "Sounds fine. Saturday night." They left quickly after that, but I caught Rebecca shooting Matthew a look that could curdle milk. They didn't realize it yet, but I'd already turned them against each other. And I wasn't done. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of bitter coffee and laid out my props. A manila folder labeled Trust Fund Provisions. Inside were meaningless pages, copies of old mortgage statements, blank paper, nothing more. But on top, I scrawled a few lines in bold black marker. Beneficiary adjustments. Matthew, primary. Rebecca, contingent. I left it just barely sticking out of my desk drawer in the study. Obvious enough to be found, but hidden enough to feel like stolen treasure. That evening, right on schedule, Rebecca came by. Alone this time, carrying a casserole dish she probably hadn't cooked herself. She insisted on putting it in the fridge, wandered down the hall with the ease of someone who thought the house was already half hers. 10 minutes later, she reemerged, her lipstick a shade smudged, eyes brighter than when she'd walked in. She thought she'd just uncovered my secret. Sure enough, the next day Matthew stormed in without knocking, his face red. "Dad, we need to talk." He threw his hands up. "Rebecca says you're leaving everything to me. Is that true?" I raised an eyebrow, hiding my grin. "Funny, I don't remember saying that." He frowned, confused. "But he stopped himself, realizing he'd said too much. I leaned back in my chair, let my voice go cold. You two should really learn to trust each other. Family's all we've got. The silence between us stretched. He left a few minutes later, but I knew his brain was already chewing itself raw. That night, I heard my phone buzz. A message from Rebecca. Dad, if Matthew tries to pressure you into anything, please call me first. I'll protect you. Protect me. I nearly laughed myself hoarse. By the weekend, my plan had them both hooked. At Saturday's dinner, they could barely sit across from each other without snapping. Rebecca kept filling my wine glass, trying to play the doting daughter. Matthew kept bringing up family responsibility, hinting that he should be the one managing my affairs. I pretended not to notice. Pretended to be tired, slow, half listening. But inside, I was cataloging every word, every slip of the mask. Then, just before dessert, I dropped my first real grenade. You know, I said casually, spooning vanilla ice cream into my bowl. I've been thinking about setting up a college fund for my grandson. Might use the lottery money for that. The silence was deafening. Rebecca nearly dropped her fork. Matthew's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. Lottery money? Rebecca echoed, too fast. I blinked slowly, feigning confusion. Oh, did I say that out loud? Neither of them touched their food. The air felt thick, charged. I could almost hear their thoughts racing, recalculating. That night, as I lay in bed, the ceiling fan groaning above me, I replayed the scene over and over. The way Rebecca's hands trembled. The way Matthew's knee bounced under the table. They knew now, or at least they thought they knew. And soon, their greed would do the rest for me. But I wasn't just watching anymore. I was steering, because the real fun was only beginning. By Monday morning, the town buzzed like a hive. At the diner, I caught whispers cutting through the hiss of the griddle. Winner's someone local, they say. Older fella, keeps to himself. They didn't say my name, but the way their eyes slid toward me when I paid for my eggs told me everything. The secret was already leaking through the cracks, and I knew exactly who'd spilled it. Rebecca showed up that afternoon with a nervous smile and a plate of cookies, like she thought sugar could sweeten treachery. She barely sat 5 minutes before blurting, Dad, you have to be careful. People are saying awful things, like you're the winner. If Matthew hears. I let her words hang in the air, then interrupted. What makes you think it's me, Rebecca? Her face stiffened, but she recovered fast. I just don't want people taking advantage of you. You've always been generous to a fault. Generous, I repeated, tasting the word like poison. She left soon after, but not before her purse brushed suspiciously against my desk drawer. I watched from the porch as she pulled out of the driveway, phone pressed tight to her ear. $10, says she was calling Matthew. But the truth was, I wanted them suspicious. Suspicion makes people sloppy. That evening, I planted my next seed. A folder labeled Florida Lottery, claimant instructions. Inside, a copy of the claim form I'd already filed with Martin, but stamped boldly with the word void across the front. I left it on the kitchen counter, just out of place enough to be noticed. And noticed it was. At dawn the next morning, I woke to the sound of my front door creaking open. Quiet footsteps on hardwood. I stayed perfectly still in bed, my breathing slow, the old shotgun hidden beneath my mattress just in case. The steps paused in the kitchen, then shuffled papers. A muffled curse, Matthew. I waited until the fridge door opened and closed. Then I coughed loudly. Footsteps froze. Matthew. I called, voice low but steady. If you're hungry, the cereal's in the cupboard. No need to tiptoe. Silence. Then the front door slammed so hard the walls rattled. I smiled in the dark. One trap sprung. By noon, the storm broke. The phone rang, and it was Rebecca, frantic. Dad, Matthew's out of control. He said he found proof, something about claim papers. He thinks you've already cashed it. Did he now? I said calmly. Yes, and he swore if you didn't share it, he'd make sure the state declared you incompetent. There it was. The knife out in the open. I let out a long sigh. Rebecca, your brother's always been dramatic. Don't worry. But I knew better. If Matthew was desperate enough to threaten court, things were about to get messy. which was exactly what I wanted. That evening, I sat at my desk, sorting through old shoeboxes of family photos. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, summers at the lake. Each picture proof of years I'd given them without hesitation. And now they were willing to tear me apart over money they hadn't earned. I slid one photo free. Matthew at 16, baseball glove on his hand, dirt smeared across his face. He'd been so proud that day. I'd taken the picture just before he hit his first home run. I wondered what that boy would think of the man he'd become. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Martin. "John," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Your kids are digging hard. I've had calls from both of them today, fishing for information. They're not even subtle." "Let them dig," I said. "I've been burying bones my whole life. They won't find what matters." Martin chuckled grimly. "All right, but brace yourself. When greed festers, it doesn't stop on its own." After the call, I walked out to the porch. The Florida dusk pressed heavy, the air buzzing with cicadas. Across the street, I saw Rebecca's car parked under the oaks, headlights off. Watching, waiting. Matthew's truck rolled up 10 minutes later, parking behind her. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They sat in their cars, engines idling, as if the house itself might confess where the ticket was hidden. I leaned on the porch rail, lit a cigar, and let the smoke drift toward them. I didn't wave either. I just stood there, silent, watching my children stew in their own suspicion. And in that moment, I felt it, the shift of power. For years, they'd treated me like I was fading. Old, weak, disposable. But now I was the one pulling strings. They just didn't know it yet. Inside, the Bible waited quietly on the shelf, the ticket pressed safe between its pages. But soon enough, it wouldn't just be paper. It would be the weapon that showed my children exactly what kind of father they'd underestimated. The war had begun, and I was ready. The silence didn't last. By Wednesday, the war had spilled straight into my living room. It started with the sound of tires skidding across gravel. Matthew's truck. He barged in without knocking, jaw tight, fists clenched. 2 minutes later, Rebecca stormed in behind him, her heels stabbing the hardwood like nails in a coffin. "You told him, didn't you?" She hissed at me before even shutting the door. "Told me what?" Matthew snapped. Rebecca spun on him, eyes blazing. "Don't play dumb. He said you've been sneaking around, looking for the ticket. You think you're fooling anyone?" I stayed seated in my recliner, mug of coffee in my hands, letting the venom flow between them. Matthew's face turned red. "At least I'm not whispering lies into Dad's ear every chance I get. Oh, Daddy, let me protect you. Let me take care of you." Pathetic. Rebecca stepped closer, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Pathetic? You're 38, divorced, drowning in debt, and you think you can handle $42 million? I almost chuckled, but caught myself. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer dark comedy of it. My children, screaming at each other over money they didn't even know I still had locked away. Finally, I raised my voice, calm but heavy as thunder. "Enough." They froze. Years of being their father still carried weight. I set down my mug. "You two think I don't see what's happening? You think I'm blind, deaf, senile? I know you've been sneaking around. I know you've both been digging." Rebecca paled. Matthew tried to mask his guilt with anger. "Well, Dad, what do you expect? People are talking. The whole town thinks you've won. If you have, don't you think you owe it to us to be honest?" "Owe it." My voice came out sharp. "I owe you nothing. Every dime I ever made went into raising you, feeding you, sending you to college, paying for your weddings. You were given more than I ever had." The room buzzed with silence. Their faces twisted with that mix of shame and defiance only greedy people can wear. Then I dropped the bomb. "I've been talking with a lawyer. If I do win, and I'm not saying I have, the money will go into a trust. Not for you. Not for your debts. For my grandson." Rebecca's lips parted. "For Dylan?" Matthew cursed under his breath. "Yes," I said. "For Dylan. He's the only one of you who still calls just to ask how I'm doing. Not for a handout. Not for a favor. Just to talk." It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Rebecca turned on Matthew. "This is your fault. You've pushed him into this with your threats and your snooping. Oh, don't start, Matthew barked. Your little fake tears and casserole deliveries didn't exactly fool him either. They stood there, two grown adults, reduced to jealous children again. And I sat back, hands folded, watching the mask finally tear away. Rebecca stormed out first, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Matthew lingered, his face dark. Dad, he said slowly. If you're lying to us, if you're playing games. I leaned forward. What, Matthew? You'll do what? He swallowed hard. But he didn't answer. He just stomped out, his truck growling down the road. The house fell quiet again, save for the ticking of the kitchen clock. I walked to the bookshelf, slid out the Bible, and traced my fingers over the thin paper edges where the ticket lay hidden. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was leverage. It was power. And soon, it would be justice. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because I knew my children. And I knew the next time they came back, it wouldn't just be with words. It would be with teeth. The storm hit on a Friday night. I'd just finished dinner, meatloaf gone cold, coffee gone bitter, when the front door rattled hard enough to shake the frame. Matthew's truck lights cut across the living room wall, and behind them, Rebecca's sedan. Both at once. That was never a good sign. They didn't knock. They barged in. Matthew's face was flushed, his hair damp with sweat. Rebecca followed close, her arms folded, lips pressed thin. They didn't even bother pretending this was a friendly visit. Dad, Matthew said, his voice low but trembling with fury, we're done with games. Either you tell us where the ticket is, or what? I asked, setting down my fork, my voice steady as stone. Rebecca stepped in. Or we'll have you declared incompetent. We've already spoken to a doctor in Tallahassee. He's ready to sign the papers. One signature from the judge, and you won't have control over anything. I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. The children I'd raised. Now strangers willing to carve me up like vultures circling a carcass. You think you can erase me with a piece of paper? I said quietly. Matthew slammed his fist on the table. Don't make me do this, Dad. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the tick of the clock on the wall. Then I laughed. Low. Cold. The sound startled even me. You're too late, I said. I already signed papers. Their eyes widened. They hadn't expected that. What papers? Rebecca asked quickly. I stood, slow, deliberate, walked to the study, and pulled a thin folder from the desk. I set it on the table between them. Bold letters across the front. Declaration of Beneficiaries. They dove on it like starving dogs. Inside, pages covered in legal jargon, real enough to look official, fake enough to mean nothing. But at the top of the first page, highlighted in yellow, were the words they couldn't ignore. Primary beneficiary, Rebecca. Contingent beneficiary, Matthew. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Matthew cursed under his breath. I let the silence choke them before I spoke. You wanted to know who I trusted? There's your answer. It was like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. Rebecca straightened, pride swelling in her chest, while Matthew's eyes burned holes through her. You set this up, he hissed. You've been whispering in his ear, poisoning him against me. You did that yourself, she shot back. Breaking into his house, threatening him. You're your own worst enemy. I watched them unravel, their voices rising, spitting accusations, dragging up old grudges from childhood. Who got more for Christmas? Who was Dad's favorite? Who deserved more now? And I sat in my chair, calm, silent, letting the fury devour them. Finally, Matthew spun back to me. This isn't over, Dad. If you don't tell me the truth, You'll what? I asked again, my voice like steel. He froze, caught in his own emptiness. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Rebecca lingered just long enough to whisper, Thank you, Daddy. You won't regret this. Then she left too, heels tapping like gunshots against the floor. When the house finally stilled, I exhaled. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The trap had sprung perfectly. They thought I'd chosen sides. What they didn't know was that the declaration was nothing but printer paper dressed up in fancy fonts. But now they were at war with each other. And war makes people reckless. That night, as I tucked the Bible back into its hiding spot, I whispered into the silence, "Mary, I wish you could see this. Your children aren't just greedy, they're fools. And fools are easy to break." My phone buzzed just after midnight. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Walker, my name is Detective Alvarez. I think we need to talk. It concerns your children." I stared at the screen, the glow sharp in the dark room. The game had just shifted again. Detective Alvarez wasn't what I expected. No polished suit, no shiny badge flashed for show. He showed up at my porch Saturday morning in jeans and a windbreaker, a man who looked more like a contractor than law enforcement. But his eyes, sharp, steady, told me he was the kind who didn't waste words. "Mr. Walker," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thanks for agreeing to meet. Mind if we sit?" I let him inside. The house still smelled faintly of last night's burnt coffee. He glanced around, taking in the cluttered bookshelves, the framed photos of Mary and the kids back when we still looked like a family. "I'll get right to it," Alvarez said, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "Your children, Matthew and Rebecca, they've both been active lately. More than usual." My stomach tightened. "Active how?" He flipped open the notebook. Matthew was inquiring at the county clerk's office. Asked about guardianship petitions, the kind that can declare someone unfit to handle their own affairs. That ring any bells? I clenched my jaw. So it was true. They were ready to put me in a cage just to get to the money. Alvarez continued. "Rebecca, meanwhile, has been making calls to a private lender in Tampa. She tried to use your house as collateral. Problem is, the title's still in your name. She can't touch it, but she's desperate enough to try." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The anger burned hot, but underneath it was a strange calm. They'd shown their cards, and with Alvarez standing in my living room, I had the perfect witness. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He studied me for a long second. "Because I've seen too many cases where kids tear their parents apart for $1. And you don't strike me as the kind of man who's going down without a fight." For the first time in weeks, I almost smiled. "I'm not," I said. He nodded once. "Then let's give them enough rope to hang themselves." That afternoon, I set the stage. I went to the bank, withdrew $10,000 in cash, small bills, stacked neat, and left the envelope sitting half open on my desk, right beside the decoy folder marked Lottery Trust Disbursement. I didn't have to wait long. By evening, Rebecca was at my door again, this time without James. Her excuse was flimsy. "Just checking on you, Dad." But her eyes went straight to the study. I let her in, offered tea, and pretended to doze in my recliner while she freshened up. 10 minutes later, I heard the faint scrape of drawers, the hushed rustle of paper. When she finally emerged, her smile was stretched too tight. "Well, I should be going. You rest, okay?" As soon as her car pulled away, I walked into the study. The envelope of cash was gone, exactly as planned. But taped beneath the desk drawer, invisible unless you knew where to look, was a tiny black recorder Alvarez had given me. Every rustle, every whispered curse, every second of her theft, captured. The next morning, Matthew made his move. He came by while I was in the yard trimming hedges, his smile forced. "Dad," he started. "Listen, I know things have been tense. But we're family. We should trust each other. Why don't you come with me to meet someone in town? A financial advisor. He can help secure any winnings you might have." I studied him, sweat dripping down my brow in the Florida sun. "And why would I need your advisor, son?" "Because," he said, voice tightening, "people are talking. About you. About a ticket. If you're not careful, someone will take advantage of you." I let out a sharp laugh. "Funny. Sounds like they already are." His face darkened. For a split second, I thought he might swing at me right there in the yard. But instead he spat on the grass, muttered something about "stubborn old fool," and stormed off. I watched his truck peel away, dust rising behind it, and I knew. They were both past the point of no return. That evening, Alvarez came back. We sat on the porch, the cicadas screaming, the recorder between us on the table. He pressed play, and Rebecca's voice filled the humid night. Come on, where is it?" Damn it, he's hiding it somewhere. Oh, hello, beautiful. The sound of paper crumpling. The faint jingle of bills. Her laugh, low and greedy. Daddy won't even miss it. Alvarez clicked it off. That's enough to nail her for theft. Combined with Matthew's clerk inquiries, we can build a case for attempted exploitation. I stared into the dark yard. Not yet, I said. Not until they understand what they've lost. Alvarez leaned back, arms crossed. You've got something in mind. I nodded slowly. They wanted a show. I'll give them one. Because the final act wasn't about police, or courts, or paperwork. It was about me standing in front of my children, looking them in the eyes, and tearing away the last shred of their illusions. And when I did, I wanted an audience. By Sunday, I had it arranged. Invitations went out. Neighbors, church friends, even the mayor who owed me a favor. I told them I was holding a family announcement. Curiosity would do the rest. Rebecca and Matthew both received handwritten notes, simple and sharp. Dinner at my house. 6 p.m. Bring nothing but the truth. I sealed each one with the same wax seal Mary had loved. A small gesture, but symbolic. This wasn't just about money. This was about blood. Sunday evening, the yard filled with cars, laughter drifting as neighbors settled on folding chairs under the oaks. Rebecca arrived first, dressed too fine, trying to look innocent. Matthew came later, jaw clenched, eyes darting. They didn't sit together. As I stood on the porch, Bible in hand, the weight of the ticket pressing inside, I felt it, the culmination of weeks of silence, lies, traps, and tests. Tonight, the masks would fall, and once they did, nothing in this family would ever be the same again. The Florida dusk painted the sky bruised purple as my neighbors filled the yard. Folding chairs scraped the grass. Murmurs rolled like low thunder. Everyone had come, folks from church, the mayor, even old Hank from down the road who hadn't left his porch in 3 years. They thought I was announcing my retirement, maybe a donation, something ordinary. But tonight wasn't about ordinary. Tonight was about truth. Rebecca and Matthew stood stiff at opposite sides of the yard. Rebecca in her pearls, trying to look like the devoted daughter. Matthew in his wrinkled shirt, fists balled, eyes darting. They didn't greet each other. They barely acknowledged me. That alone told the crowd something was off. I stepped onto the porch, Bible in hand. The murmurs quieted. The cicadas screeched one last time, then seemed to fall silent too. Thank you for coming, I said, my voice carrying steady into the humid air. I asked you here because family is supposed to be sacred. Mine isn't, and I think you deserve to see why. I opened the Bible. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I slid out the lottery ticket, the paper glinting under the porch light. Yes, I said simply. $42 million. I won. But what came after is the real story. I nodded to Detective Alvarez, who stood off to the side with his recorder. He clicked play. Rebecca's voice spilled out into the night, clear as day. Come on, where is it? Damn it, he's hiding it somewhere. Oh, hello, beautiful. Daddy won't even miss it. The crowd turned toward her, whispers sharp as knives. Rebecca's face drained of color. She stammered, that's not. But Alvarez silenced her with a look. Before she could recover, I laid the decoy folder on the table in front of me. And Matthew, my son, he's been planning to have me declared incompetent, filing papers behind my back to take control of my home, my life, my name. Gasps again. All eyes swung to him. Matthew's face twisted, desperate. He's lying. He's old, confused, you can't trust. But I cut him off. Confused? I raised you. I fed you. I paid for your schools, your weddings, your debts. And what did I get? Lies. Theft. Betrayal. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. I held up the Bible again, ticket glinting. This was never about money. This was about seeing my children for who they truly are. And now, so has everyone else. Rebecca's tears streaked her makeup. Matthew stood frozen, fists shaking, eyes hollow. Neither of them looked at me. They looked at the ground, because that was all they had left. I turned to the crowd, then back to them. My voice dropped low, final. You thought this ticket was your future. But the truth is simple. I slid the ticket back into the Bible, snapped it shut, and looked them dead in the eye. You never deserved it. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and write in the comments if something like this has ever happened in your life. I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for watching.